So this is Analyzing Hope, the live possibility account out of the European Journal of Philosophy. Hey Vipers, what's up? How you doing? Hope all is well with you and you're getting sweet dreams. Oh, not that one, this one. Clicky clicky. Yeah, so I just found this paper. I'm going to start reading it as always. Feel free to comment if you want. If not, that's cool too. Hope you're well, Vipers. Getting some good rest at least, even if the dreams are kicking your ass. Okay, so here we go. Introduction. In recent philosophical literature, the attention given to the analysis of hope seems to be steadily increasing. One reason for this spark in interest is that the orthodox definition, henceforth OD, of propositional hope comes with an exclusion problem. According to OD, hope can be analyzed in terms of desire and epistemic possibility. However, these criteria do not properly exclude subjects without hope, and even despairing subjects can fulfill them. Okay. For an introductory example, consider the mother of a toddler lost in the wilderness. Granted that she desires the safe return of her child and considers the child's return an epistemically possible, more on this notion later, so the kid can be found. Can we thereby conclude that she hopes? No, we cannot. For all we know, she might even despair over the prospect. Okay, so you may not, even though you know it's rationally possible for something to happen, you may not actually have any hope that it does happen. So this could be like something where you lack confidence, or you're overconfident. You could tell someone, there's technically the possibility that I could, outrun or outswim Michael Phelps or something. Or I could outrun some, sprinter, what's that guy's name? Usain Bolt. But, I mean, there's no... It's, metaphysically possible. There's no chance. And so it's do I have any hope for that? No. But the idea of the epistemic possibility, do I know that, Usain could just, decide to not run that day and automatically and just lose? Yeah, he could do that. It wouldn't happen. But yeah, okay. So the exclusion problem shows that the conditions of OD, so that's the orthodox definition in terms of epistemic possibility and desire. So the orthodox definition are not sufficient for hope. Something more is needed, and several recent accounts of hope have tried to specify what that something is. Alright, so this is sounding more and more like justified true belief, that you had this traditional definition that people kind of thought was good, and then they're starting to realize, there's ways around that. So, okay. Author suggests that we can improve the analysis of hope by introducing a James-inspired concept of a live possibility. Yeah, see, I have no live possibility of beating Usain Bolt in a race. I'm just not that fast. Okay, author aims to show how my account is better at handling the exclusion problem than some recent competitors, while at the same time it deepens our understanding of when and why a subject might hope. In arguing for the live possibility account, I consider two major desiderata I think all analyses of hope should be measured by. The first desideratum is that an account of hope should be able to address the exclusion problem and rightly separate cases where hope is present from those where it is not. This desideratum boils down to the basic requirement that an analysis should capture the concept being analyzed in a satisfying manner. Yeah, Vipers, anything you hoping for? New job? Money? Something. As a second desideratum, we should prefer an analysis which comes with the resources to explain why someone does or does not hope. While this is not a formal requirement for a successful analysis, I take it to be an important goal for any analysis that it also deepens our understanding of the phenomena at hand. If in doubt about this desideratum, consider how we would treat an analysis of knowledge that lack the resources to explain why some people know P while others are ignorant. Okay, make coffee. No problem. Oh, I was just saying, you're hoping for coffee. I understand. The second desideratum has not been given much attention in the current debate. Many of the suggested analyses lack the resources to give any deeper explanation of why some subjects hope and others not others. Of the accounts I am aware of, most are either salient or silent on the matter or simply push the problem up a level in the explanatory chain. When it comes to improving the original definition, the orthodox definition, in order to overcome the exclusion problem, there are at least two major ways which this might be done. Either we can try to find some further condition or conditions which, together with desire and epistemic possibility, is sufficient for hope, so like an orthodox definition plus account, or we could try to qualify the existing conditions of the orthodox definition, elaborating them so they become sufficient for hope without the addition of further conditions. So an ODQ. So we have you can modify the original definitions to like be more restrictive, or you can add something to them and then maybe it'll work. Most of the authors working on hope have chosen the former approach. While I think the benefits of an ODQ approach are generally overlooked, I wish to remain neutral on the issue. My suggested changes to the orthodox definition can be implemented in both OD plus and ODQ accounts. Okay, you could either add something to the original accounts, the orthodox accounts, or like refine them. On the refinement, the existing condition concerning epistemic possibility is reinterpreted in terms of live possibility. On the plus account, a condition concerning live possibility is simply added to the account. However, since the live possibility condition will make the epistemic possibility condition redundant also on the plus account, because all live possibilities are epistemic possibilities as well, but not vice versa, the resulting analysis will look the same regardless of the preferred approach. Yeah, I mean, this is like half dozen of one, six of the other. That's fine. Before continuing, some further clarifications are in order. It is common practice to distinguish between prosaic or everyday hope and a more profound kind, often referred to as hope against hope. I do not share the view that they are best separated, and my aim is to present a unified account. Also, my aim is supposed to cover both future-oriented hope for some uncertain outcome and epistemic hope that something is the case. Finally, my interest is in hope that can be considered in a wide sense rational, not in the sense that it is rationally required, but in the sense that it is intellectually legitimate and rationally permitted, rather than blameworthy or foolish. Excuse me. I will presuppose that this is mainly a question about the epistemic rationality of hope. Considerations concerning the practical rationality of hope fall outside the scope of this text. Yeah, hey Valpo, what's up? Is there anything you hope for? I was kind of hoping for this, that the topic might just be interesting here. Okay, Vipers, nothing happened. They're just saying there's an orthodox definition of hope. They don't quite like it. Apparently, you can fulfill the definition of hope and not actually be hoping. Basically, it says you have to want something and that you have to think it's a possibility. And I was saying, basically, look, I could want to win a race, but if, like, Usain Bolt is there is no reason I'm actually hoping I'm going to win. But even though I know it's rationally possible that Usain could, like, fall down and, like, not complete the race, and then I would win. And, like, so it's a possible, and I want to win. But, like, I have no hope if some fast people are in the race because I'm not a speedy person. That's all it is. And then they're going to, modify this definition, which they call OD, the orthodox definition. So yeah, anything you guys are hoping for in chat, like that you can tell me in chat, that's TOS. I was hoping I'd win that $1 billion lottery, but I guess that would fall under the foolish hopes that they're saying they're not talking about. Yes, exactly. So this is the goal that they said. That was part of the other thing that they said here was that they're doing it because, maybe if they have a better definition, then we can understand it better. And if they can analyze actual hope better, then that's worth something. So it's like, it's the dictionary. Well, it's not the dictionaries. It's other philosophers. Other philosophers being wrong is not particularly surprising. Or people, or you should be accepted uncritically. So, all right, and then this little thing here, this last paragraph, I'm just gonna skip because I get sick of people telling me that they're gonna sum up the discussion. Okay, thank you, so helpful. Okay, the orthodox definition and the exclusion problem. According to the orthodox definition, hope is to be analyzed in terms of desire and epistemic possibility. Beatrice Hahn Pyle sums up, I apologize how I say your name, it's probably Han Pile or something, sums up OD as follows. A hope that P, if and only if one, a desire that P, A desires that P, and 2, A assigns it to P a degree of probability between and excluding 0 and 1. On this definition, hope is to desire an outcome we deem neither certain nor impossible. You're hoping to have another sex dream that will reaffirm your heterosexuality. I trust that you will have one, though. And if not, no great loss there either. So yeah. But I'm sure the person you were thinking of is always happy to be thought of. These conditions are usually read as being both necessary and sufficient. The desire component is straightforward. To hope that P is the subject, the subject must desire that P. While some philosophers have suggested minor alterations, like substituting desire with attraction or preference, almost everyone seems to agree that a motivational condition is needed in the analysis. Valpa says, I hope he cites Katie Stockdale. She's good on hope. Okay. I have no idea about any of this topic. Like, this is nothing I've ever, looked at all, so we'll see. The notion of epistemic possibility commonly used is one that excludes certainty and impossibility. This means that for P to be an epistemic possibility, for S must neither believe P to be impossible nor certain. This can also be put as the claim S believes P to have the probability between 0 and 1. It should be noted that epistemic possibility concerns solely what the subject believes to be possible, rather than what is actually possible. If one is ill-informed or ignorant, one might well regard something as possible, even though it is in fact not. For example, if one does not know that one's uncle is dead, one might well consider it possible that the uncle is on a vacation. You hope this paper is short? It's not that long, but there's a lot of words per page. So it's like 12 pages here. Yes, but I always hope my papers are short. Quite often they're not. This also means that if a subject is uncertain whether P is objectively possible or not, she will still view P as an epistemic possibility. The problem with the orthodox definition is that it falls victim to the exclusion problem, since the definition is unable to correctly exclude all situations where hope is absent. The problem is most striking in cases where the subject despairs, since on any plausible interpretation, despair should exclude hope. Yeah. In terms of necessary and sufficient conditions, the exclusion problem means that even though desire and epistemic possibility seem necessary for hope, they are not also jointly sufficient, since there are cases where the conditions are met but where hope is lacking. The philosophical challenge is to elaborate the account so that its conditions become both jointly necessary and jointly sufficient. However, before moving on to discuss some recent attempts at doing so, I want to offer some suggestions on how best to illustrate the problem. Yeah, this is the thing. Like, if you're just defining it in terms of things being possible and you wanting it, I mean, I want to win the lottery, and it's possible I win the lottery, but I'm not actually I hope I'm gonna win, but it's not it's a foolish thing. That's the foolish thing that they sort of said they didn't want to talk about at the beginning. And also the opposite side is the despair. When you just know that it's so impossible, unlikely that to be nearly impossible, even though it's technically possible, then you don't have hope because it's just ridiculous. So again, you're being foolish. So, okay. So this is getting like I said, this is getting me real Gettier problem vibes, where basically Gettier, you can always be right for the wrong reasons. Like, you can have epistemic luck. You can be right, but by being lucky, and then it's not considered knowledge. And so similar to this, it seems like you can not have hope, even though it's technically possible. It is justified true belief. It's this orthodox definition, but then again, it fails. There is no hope. You're wrong, but for the right reasons. You have all the stuff, but you have no hope still. So yeah, you can be wrong for the right reasons in a Gettier problem too. So you have all the justifications, but you do not have knowledge. So that's the 10 coins in the pocket example from Gettier, for those who care or know what I'm talking about. Alright, illustrating the exclusion problem. The current literature on hope contains several well-discussed examples, which all purport to illustrate the exclusion problem. Most of the examples contain situations where it is claimed that two people assign the same probability to an outcome and desire it with equal strength, and yet only one of them hopes. Here is one of the most widely discussed, the Shawshank Redemption case, as it appears in Ariel Mayrov, 2009. Suppose the prisoners Andy and Red from the movie Shawshank Redemption. This makes me happy. At least this is actually why I picked the paper, because I saw there was a lot of quotes, and this is exactly what I was hoping for. We'd actually have some good examples in this paper. Suppose the prisoners Andy and Red from the movie Shawshank Redemption have been discussing the chances of attaining freedom, reviewing all the options of escape, early release on parole, general amnesty, etc. Suppose they agree on all the details, that is, what conditions are on which each of these options depend, and how likely these conditions are. Perhaps Red summarizes the picture by saying that the chances are 1 in 1,000, and Andy does not disagree. Red will say, I grant you that it is possible, but the chance is only 1 in 1,000. Whereas Andy will say, I grant you the chances is only 1 in 1,000, but it is possible. The whole of the contrast between hoping and despairing seems to be expressed in the subtle difference between the intonations of the word possible in these two sentences. Viper says, the lottery example reminded me of a Dan Gilbert talk where he said he was wrong about the utility of lottery tickets. People didn't seriously expect to win, but it gave them permission to daydream. Yeah, I mean, why do people actually play the lottery? It's not because they're irrational most of the time. Most of the time they know very clearly. I mean, not everyone understands exactly how astronomically low some of these big lottery jackpot wins are. But like, most people are not that stupid. They know they're not going to win. They haven't really won much in the past. They have no reason to think they're going to win this time. And so it's like, it's more of a form of, keeping themselves going. My grandma was very poor and from and she said that everyone, when she was growing up, played the numbers because basically it was the only way that you would get out of the old neighborhood, because frankly there was no other chance of making any money. And so the fact that anyone would win the local gambling thing in that neighborhood meant they got to move up in the world. And so it was not so much that anyone expected to win. It was just the idea that somebody from the neighborhood would win the numbers, in the local bookies thing, and that would give them a leg up. And so in some sense it was almost a social program, even though the bookie was making a lot of money off this, of course. But they all knew what the score was, but that wasn't the point. The point was that it gave them the dream that someone from the neighborhood would get a leg up and be able to get out. Okay. While useful as heuristic devices, I worry that examples like this might seem question-begging from an orthodox definition point of view. Would an orthodox definition or defender not claim that there must be a difference between the strength of the desires of the subjects and that it is question-begging to suppose otherwise without argument? However, it is not entirely obvious where the burden of proof lies. Meyrov seems to suggest that the defender of the orthodox view, who clings to his theory even when faced with examples like Shawshank, is the one who is really begging the question. Yeah. So it's if you claim that Andy and Red have the exact same desires, then why is one still hoping when the other one isn't? And it seems like that's just a definitional thing. And so someone's begging the question here. Okay. Author says, I think the whole issue might be sidestepped by providing less ambiguous illustrations. Some remarks by Adrian Martin can point us in the right direction. When discussing a Shawshank-style story with cancer patients instead of inmates, Martin notices that for a severely ill person, a 20% chance of getting a cure might seem like good odds for recovery one day and bad odds the next. She also notices that it would be strange to suggest that it is the subject's desire to be cured which is changing. With this case, a subject being torn between hope and despair, even though probability and desire remain fixed. Martin has provided one of the clearest counterexamples yet to the orthodox definition. Yeah, so that's interesting. But of course, every day you're alive with cancer, you're losing the battle. The cancer is eating more of your body. So you are getting, every day your chance of living goes down. That you are not getting a cure, because the cancer will replicate. That's the nature of cancer. So 20%, at a certain point, when you're at 0%, 20% is infinitely bigger. Or if you're at some minimal thing, 20% is huge. So it's you're gonna be much happier for that. But well, that's fair, Vipers, but you're losing a lot faster with cancer. So yeah. That's the thing. So, but that's it in relative terms. The point here is, what's interesting about this is that once you get into these relative terms, then you can see that your desire to live is the same, and the chance of the chance of the cure is the same, but like the fact that like sort of the time you have left maybe or something else, nothing else is really changing, then you could say, okay, the person now is despairing and then they're hoping. And so it's like the fact that everything is so uncertain, even though the possibility isn't any different, that actually does seem to change that fact that like sometimes you can have hope, sometimes you won't, but like, you know, it's the shitty thing that cancer does to you is you don't know what's going to actually work. Okay. So, author says, building on Martin, I offer 2 additional examples containing a single subject with a fixed desire and fixed probability assignments. These examples illustrate the insufficiency of the orthodox definition by showing that even though the OD requirements are met, we cannot conclusively tell if the subject has hope or not. First, consider a soldier in the hell-like trenches of the Great War's Western Front. The soldier knows the probabilities for survival are slim, but they are not negligible. They are definitely too small to warrant any rational belief of survival. Further, suppose that the soldier has not lost his desire to live. Can we, from this information alone, know whether the whole soldier hopes for survival, or whether he has lost all hope and despairs? No, we cannot. Secondly, consider a pessimistic police investigator hunting a serial killer. The killer is hard to catch, and the victims are piling up. However, the investigator is not without evidence, and he has a good track record on this sort of investigations. Obviously, the investigator desires to capture the killer, but does he also hope to capture the killer, or does he despair over the prospects? And if he hopes, would it be plausible to think that he hopes to capture the killer by stumbling into him on the street? Yeah, he is like one of these drunk, grizzled guys. I hate my life, and I'm going to capture this killer if it's the last thing I do. Whatever. I don't know, Vipers. That's an excellent question. But, like, at least it makes for more entertaining examples than we usually get. So, I hope it continues. Okay. 2 recent accounts, Kwong and Calhoun. Before the author presents their own account, I will consider 2 recent attempts to develop the orthodox account, both of which I think are somewhat on the right track. These are the accounts by Jack M.C. Kwong and Calhoun. Why does Kwong get their full name here and Calhoun not get their full name? Interesting. Anyway. All right. Orthodox definition plus a perceived way of realization. According to the account offered by Kwong, the main difference between hope and despair lies in the hoper's ability to conceive of a way in which P might be realized. Hope also requires that the way itself is regarded as a genuine possibility. Kwong gives several examples to illustrate his idea, like the discussion between the football supporters Mandy and Scott. And there's a quote, Mandy and Scott are discussing the prospect of their favorite football team making the playoffs in the upcoming season. Although they both desire that the team will have a successful season, they agree that its chances are slim. Yeah, like my New York football Giants made the playoffs and won a goddamn football playoff game this year. It's very exciting. The current lineup, they lament, is nearly identical to last year's, which had a dismal record, and its key player is injured. Despite having both a strong desire for their team to do well and the belief that it has a low chance of doing so, Mandy and Scott display different attitudes. Whereas she holds out hope that the team will do well, Scott despairs. When Scott queries her about her hopefulness, she responds, maybe the general manager will make a surprise trade, or maybe last year's rookie players will have a breakthrough year. Maybe our team will even be reassigned to a division with less competitive rivals. Maybe the injured star player will recover sooner than expected. While not denying that in some instances, seeing a way in which P could be realized might be what distinguishes hope from despair, it also seems clear to me that this is not a necessary condition. Consider the much-discussed case of Plenty Coups, the last chief of the Crow Nation. Plenty Coups? I don't know. The last great chief of the Crow Nation. While the world was changing beyond recognition for the Crow, Plenty Coups held out hope that his people would somehow survive and thrive in this new world. This hope, based on a vision the chief had in his youth, did not only lack a clear content as to what exactly the chief hoped for, it also lacked any details about how the hoped-for outcome was going to be realized. Viper says, totally aside, but recently, out of sheer curiosity, I googled the global popularity of sports. American football has 400 million. Ping pong has 850 million. Yeah, that's fair. Ping pong's much more popular in China, so there's more people over there. But like, yeah, I think that by market cap, American football is like either like on par with soccer or just below. But like its market cap, American football is, I don't know where ping pong is on that list, but like American football's like 1 or 2. So it's one of the reasons why it's, you hear about it a lot. It's because it's where a lot of money's being thrown around. Yeah, I mean, table tennis is very popular in like China and like other parts of the world. I had a Serbian apartment mate, and she, like, anything that you could play in a gym, like, they were really happy about, like, they were very popular about that. So like things like tennis, you could play it like inside like a gym. When Djokovic got popular, ping pong was very popular, basketball was very popular. They had all these old gymnasiums from the Soviet era that they had maintained over the years. So it's like, there's cultural differences there about these sorts of things. But like they didn't play like they didn't have the football, not the American football, of course. So why would they play that? Okay. Continuing. Far from being defective, the hope of Plenty Coups seems to have been both deep and profound. It has even been suggested that such unimaginable hope is actually the strongest kind there is, since it stands firm against any attempt at falsification by future evidence. Quite clearly, Plenty Coups did not conceive of a way in which his hope could be realized. I mean, at that point you might call it delusion, though. I mean, is it hope or is it delusion? Alright. However, when discussing an example where a person hopes to solve a challenging mathematical puzzle, Kwong suggests that even though the subject presently sees no way to solve the puzzle, she might retain hope that if she sees that it is possible that she might discover some such way in the future. Perhaps Kwong could argue that Plenty Coups had hope because he saw that a way for the crow to thrive might present itself in the future. Perhaps that was what the vision suggested. While this solution might do justice to the chief's hope, it also seems like a radical softening of Kwong's original requirement. It seems to suggest that it is not seeing of a way, but seeing the possibility that one might see a way in the future. That is a requirement for hope. This is problematic in at least 2 ways. First, it makes Kwong's account unable to solve the exclusion problem. While not denying that seeing a future possibility of finding a way might sometimes lead to hope, it also seems entirely plausible to think of a subject in despair claiming, "I recognize I might see a way out of my misery in the future, but as long as that does not happen, I cannot hope." Second, Kwong's softened requirement appears to make his account more permissive than the orthodox definition itself. OD requires the subject to view P as epistemically possible, but it surely seems possible to recognize that something one does not presently believe to be epistemically possible might still present itself as realizable in the future. If one sets one's mind to it, is there any boundary to the things one might perceive as becoming realizable in the future? While Kwong's original requirement does not seem a necessary condition, the relaxed version seems overly inclusive. Yeah, so if you start saying, well, hope just means you might find some way to think about this, that doesn't seem like it's way too loose. Like, I might win the lottery in the future, I could see how that would happen, but I definitely don't see like that's not going to be sufficient for hope. Like that I'm going to win. I could see how I could win the lottery in the future, but like why? Alright, author continues. However, we must remember that apart from a perceived way of realization, Kwong also demands that P must be a genuine epistemic possibility. Only seeing a way in which P might be realized is not in itself sufficient for hope. Quote, upon hearing Mandy's barrage of maybes, Scott may well dismiss them as too unlikely or far-fetched and continue to despair. Kwong requires the perceived way to be a genuine possibility, and I assume that he would claim that for Scott, Mandy's barrage of maybes is not such a genuine possibility. The example strongly suggests that the notion of genuine possibility is at least as central to the account as the idea of a perceived way of realization. It also makes clear that it is this genuine possibility which ultimately separates the hoper from the subject without hope, making it the part of Kwong's analysis which is of interest with regards to our second desideratum. Unfortunately, it's not entirely clear what Kwong means by a genuine epistemic possibility. In passages like the one above, it seems that being a genuine possibility is a matter of probability. In other words, genuine possibility must not be highly improbable. This sharply contrasts with what Kwong says in other places, where the emphasis lies on the subject's ability to see how things might develop along the perceived way, and he explicitly denies that such a seeing must affect probabilities that a person assigns. Quote, to see a way to the outcome as a genuine possibility is therefore not only to see that it exists, but also to see that we can move forward on it towards the outcome, whether in action or in thought. The conceived way need not affect the person's belief about the outcome's probability. End quote. How to make sense of the idea that the hopeful person perceives the way as genuinely possible, while the despairing does not, without invoking probabilities. If Scott and Mandy assign the same probability to both the desired outcome and to Mandy's perceived way by which it might be realized, why does Scott despair while Mandy is hoping? Okay. This is an interesting question about probability. Why should the two numerical things be different when the number is the same? There are actually different kinds of probabilities. There are objective and subjective, and so maybe they're referring to like what they think the probability is in their head versus the way it actually is in the world. Scott's looking at the objective probabilities in the world, while Mandy's treating it as the subjective way she's viewing the situation in her head. Now, they are agreeing on all the facts, but Scott's treating it as a more objective and Mandy's treating it as more subjective. Subjective gives her the leeway to think about this more, where Scott does not have that, is more objective, like, will the radioactive material, do something? Like, will a particle be emitted? Well, you don't know. There's no reason to think it will. Whereas if it's subjective and you're saying, well, do I think it's going to, how do I think about the world? What do I feel about it? Well, maybe the feelings at that point can affect how you're interpreting the numbers. Possible. Okay. So, but like, this is a separate issue. This is just something I'm bringing up here. I don't think anyone else is going to talk about this because I'm probably wrong. But like, there's different ways of viewing probability, and most people are not going to jump into that sort of thinking here. All right. Author says, though, it might be suggested that unlike Scott, Mandy does not calculate the probabilities, and this is what accounts for their difference. On this reading of Kwong, entertaining the maybes is what makes Mandy regard the desired outcome as a genuine possibility, while Scott despairs because he has worked out the actual probabilities. Now, while this suggestion succeeds in preventing a reading on which genuine possibility reduces to probability, it also seems to imply that Mandy's hope is irrational. It seems a very plausible requirement for rational hope that one must not lose hope if one works out the actual probabilities for P. Yeah, so this is what the difference between possibility, this sometimes how it's called possibility, what like is a subjective thing, and the actual probability. But you can do it the other way. You can have a subjective probability too. You're just talking about how your thoughts in the matter. And so it's like when your thoughts in the matter are saying about the world, maybe you have less worry about saying, well, my thoughts might be wrong. Whereas if Scott thinks it's objective, the probability is just somehow fixed, then he has less reason to say that these things are wrong because he regards it as objective. But this is just different ways of interpreting probability. Okay. Author says, I do think that Kwong is on the right track, and I agree that genuine possibility, or live possibility to use the author's favorite term, cannot be reduced to probability alone. However, I regard it as a mistake to claim that genuine or live possibility has nothing to do with probability. On my account, what is a live possibility depends partly on probability calculations, but also on several other factors. However, before presenting my own view, I turn to discuss the account offered by Calhoun. Okay, so the orthodox definition plus a phenomenological idea of the future. Ooh, phenomenological idea of the future. Like Kwong, Calhoun tries to downplay the role of probability assignment, and the new element she introduces in her theory is a phenomenological idea of the future. Hope I propose is a belief that that success in a pursuit is possible, a preference that success is what actually materializes in the temporal unfolding of events, and a phenomenological idea of the determinate future whose content includes success. All right, end quote. Calhoun contrasts the phenomenological idea of the future with the planning idea of the future. The latter is the view that the future according to which the subject makes concrete plans based on consciously held beliefs and considerations. The phenomenological idea, on the other hand, is partly unconscious and unreflective, and it is meant to capture our basic sense of the future, which serves as a background for our propositional states. At its core, it is about inhabiting the future and by being drawn to previsage a particular future in our imagination. That this idea of the future is determinate means that in it, the outcome in question is either realized or not. One will have either succeeded or failed. The difference between hope and despair is straightforward given the account. The hoper's phenomenological idea involves success, while the despairing subject holds an idea of the future which involves failure. All right, so you're just envisioning the future one way. Even though you think the probability is fixed, you're kind of just ignoring that, I guess. All right. Author says, it does not seem to me that a positive phenomenological idea of the future is necessary for hope. I think the unimaginable hope of Chief Palmqvist offers a counterexample. Lacking a clear content, Palmqvist's hope could hardly be interpreted as a phenomenological idea of the future in Calhoun's sense. As I understand Calhoun, living in and previsaging the future are defining marks of having such an idea. Without clear content, it is hard to see how Palmqvist could do either of these things. There could not be any determinate idea of the future in which Palmqvist's hope is realized because his hope is in no way determinate. Furthermore, the claim that hope is determined by a phenomenological idea of the future seems exaggerated. I mean, why does this person have any idea what was in Palmqvist's head? This author. What actually is a phenomenological idea? They're saying it's not determinate. Why does it have to be so determinate? You have to have like maybe just a very determined phenomenology, not a determined idea, but a very determined phenomenology. Not so sure about this. It's hard to like say how people's ideas are in their head, you know? And so the idea that like the author is right to criticize Calhoun because not like Calhoun has a better thing to say about this, especially since they're saying, hey, look, you have a very determinate thing in your head, even though we can't say anything determinate about it. Like you have a very fixed thing in your head, even though it's maybe not be determinate. I don't know what this determinate idea of the future is, but maybe just a determined one. Okay. All right, continuing. Furthermore, the claim that hope is determined by our phenomenological idea of the future seems exaggerated. If my phenomenological idea of the future is overall a negative and bleak forecast, one including the predicted failure of my present endeavors, could I not hope against such a sense of the future? For example, think of a terminally ill cancer patient with low odds of recovery. Previous experience and several psychological factors have given her a quite negative outlook on life. Unsurprisingly, her phenomenological idea of the future includes her own demise. According to Calhoun, this woman is in despair by definition, and to start hoping she would need another idea of the future. While I do not doubt that subjects with a negative sense of the future tend to despair more than those who have a positive sense, it seems an exaggeration to claim that one's hope or despair is determined by one's phenomenological idea of the future. I do not think it is far-fetched to interpret the notion of hope against hope as exactly a hope against all expectation, including one's phenomenological idea of the future. Yeah, because I guess it would beg the question if they said, no, the whole hope turns on the phenomenological idea of the future. But you can see how this is a powerful idea. Like if you have some sort of fantasy and like you know it's unrealistic, but that's what you're hoping for, like that's a phenomenological idea of the future. Like it's some sort of fantasy that you have. Now if you despair, you might still say, okay, there is a fantasy, but I'm treating it as such. And so it's this sort of like the idea that there's this sort of forward-looking thing and hope. Yeah, you could, but the author is right here that you could still have a fantasy and say, look, it's a fantasy, but I'm deluding myself. I'm not hoping for it, really. I know it's a delusion or a fantasy, and therefore it's not like hope. It's just something I'm using to distract myself in my, as a distraction to separate from like current terrible state of affairs. Okay, turning to the second desideratum, we can ask how Calhoun's account can help deepen our understanding of hope. If the phenomenological idea of the future governs hope and despair, the exclusion problem is simply pushed back an explanatory level. What really determines whether a subject hopes or despairs is whatever determines whether the phenomenological idea of the future involves success or failure. However, unlike most authors who address hope, Calhoun has several things to say about what is happening on the secondary level. Calhoun stresses that while probability obviously has some impact on whether the subject is pulled towards a successful or failed future, it is not the only deciding factor. She proposes that a plurality of psychological sources are also relevant, especially those building on past experience. I will return to these psychological sources in the following section. On the author's account, such sources are one of several important kinds of non-probabilistic factors that influence whether the subject views an epistemic possibility as live. Okay, so far we've got like some ideas about like think about the future, think about what's actually possible, like how you could actually actualize a future where things work out, but the author doesn't like them, so we're going to now turn to their account, which is the live account, not the dead account. Okay, and what page are we on? 714. So we're more than halfway through at this point. The live possibility account. Authors writing on hope standardly adopt the widest possible sense of epistemic possibility, a believed probability between and excluding only 0 and 1. In my view, this is a mistake. I opt for a narrower, although still quite flexible sense of epistemic possibility in terms of live possibility. As a result, I offer the following definition of hope. S hopes that P, if and only if 1, S desires P, and S views P as a live possibility. Okay, since the concept of a live possibility is inspired by the Jamesian notion of a live hypothesis, James' own thoughts on the matter serve as a suitable point of departure. Quote, a live hypothesis is one which appeals to a real possibility to him to whom it is proposed. If I ask you to believe in the Mahdi, the notion makes no electric connection with your nature. It refuses to scintillate with any credibility at all. As a hypothesis, it is completely dead. To an Arab, however, even if he be not one of the Mahdi's followers, the hypothesis is among the mind's possibilities. It is alive. Next quote. If I say to you, be a theosophist or be a Mohammedan, it is probably a dead option because neither hypothesis is likely to be alive. But if I say, be an agnostic or be a Christian, it is otherwise. Trained as you are, each hypothesis makes some appeal, however small, to your belief. All right, so end quotes. James is concerned with religious hypotheses, but the notion of a live hypothesis is in no way restricted to this context. Neither is it restricted to the unknown. It works equally well concerning the future. James presents his idea of a live hypothesis in a vivid and colorful fashion, using the term interchangeably with an option that is alive and a real possibility. A live possibility is contrasted with a dead one. Phenomenologically, it is not hard to draw parallels between the account suggested by James and the accounts of hope assessed in the previous section. Like Kwong and Calhoun, James's focus lies in what the subject perceives as actually possible in a non-trivial way. All right, so now we're finally getting somewhere. You have to define what it is to be non-trivial or live. So, I mean, sure. How, like, who the hell knows? I mean, the whole point was that you give probability, but there's something more to it, and it has to be non-trivial to you, so this is going to be a subjective thing. All right. When it comes to James's account of the phenomenology, I have little to add, and I will not try to replace his strong and vivid images with my analysis. Rather, my contribution concerns the second desideratum, explaining why someone does or does not hope. If hoping is a matter of viewing something one desires as a live possibility, what is it that makes someone view a possibility as alive so that it is among the mind's possibilities and makes some appeal? On this issue, James is not very forthcoming, and I will try to fill out the account by suggesting a probability-based view of live possibility. Yeah, I wouldn't do this if I was the author. No. You have to appeal to people's emotions at this point. probability is not going to help you here because you already got that. No, 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 no. This is the wrong strategy. Bad, bad, bad in terms of argumentation. You already have probability. The idea that you're going to have more probability is going to be a problem. What you need is either appeal to people's emotions or their fundamentals, something like that. But like this is already like this is. I know why they're doing this because you can make like a very strong case this way. But what I was saying before about the subjective probability versus the objective probability is different, because the subjective, that is going to play into how the person reasons about the probability, and not the objective one, which the objective one says it's out in the world. The subjective one says it's part of like your like psychology, how you think the world is. And so when something's part of how you think the world is, maybe there's ways that it could be rejiggered, even though the numerical value is the same as like the objective probability say. But like, yeah, they need different resources, so we'll see where they get. But right here, I have the interpretations of probability. Like you gotta. I don't think they're gonna be able to get what they want, but let's find out. All right, continuing. While a probability-based view might not be exactly what James had in mind, and while assigning probabilities to our beliefs and expectations regarding epistemic possibilities might not be entirely psychologically realistic, such a view comes with several theoretical advantages. It allows us to make calculations regarding epistemic rationality, and it facilitates comparison between different epistemic possibilities in a straightforward manner, to mention a few. Yeah, this is why everyone does it, because it makes everything easy when you have a number. You can be like, this number is 3, and that number is 4, and 4 is greater than 3. But like, again, in real life, 4 being greater than 3 has no bearing on why people do anything. All right. Something being a live possibility is a narrower notion of epistemic possibility than the wider sense commonly found in analyses of hope. Something can certainly fail to be a live possibility while still being epistemically possible in the wider sense. Strictly speaking, anything is epistemically possible in the wide sense if we are not certain it is false. Consider the possibility of discovering traces of life on other terrestrial bodies in our solar system. Let us suppose that it is a live possibility that such traces might be discovered on one of the celestial bodies standardly mentioned as likely candidates, like Mars or Jupiter's ocean-covered moon Europa. However, since our solar system has not yet been properly explored, it is certainly epistemically possible in the widest sense that there are traces of life everywhere except for the few places we have thoroughly investigated. But no one would consider it a live possibility that there are actually traces of life everywhere in the solar system where we have not yet had the chance to look. The difference between something being a live possibility and an epistemic possibility in the wide sense strongly suggests that there is a kind of positive probability threshold an epistemic possibility must reach in order to be live. The probability of P needs to be reasonably high for P to represent a live possibility. But how high exactly? All right, so this is what they're doing. They're saying, look, what I was saying was there's ways in which to explain why people set the threshold. They're just saying, look, there looks to be that there are thresholds, and they're not explaining it. So they've just declared that there is a threshold, and they're just going to describe a threshold theory here. I don't like that, but I mean, it's a descriptive theory in that, yes, there are limits to like when we start to... I don't even know if they can actually get a good account of this, but the fact that they can say, hey, look, at some point we start to believe stuff like more readily. Is it like 50%? They're probably not going to say that, but like at some point they're going to have to say it. I don't know how they're actually going to make this argument, and I am a little skeptical right now. I do not hope that they're going to do it. I hope they're going to do a good job, but I don't really believe it. Or I don't think they're going to agree with me, at least. I should say that. I doubt they're going to agree with me, but they might do a good job still. All right, continuing. If we consider the examples offered by James, they seem to suggest a context-dependent notion of a live hypothesis. I think a fruitful way of interpreting this context dependency is to claim that the probability threshold for what constitutes a live possibility might vary between context and, most importantly, between subjects. All right, context and subjects, now we're just hand-waving. In other words, the reason that a live possibility for me is not a live possibility for you is that we use different threshold values to determine if a possibility is probable enough to be considered live. Yeah, so this is just saying, oh, you have different standards than I do. Okay, that's it. For example, even if person A persons A and B both assign probability .0.2 to an outcome P, says 20%, it might be the case that A's threshold for an event being a live possibility is a subjective probability of 0.3, while B's is only 0.1. In this case, B would only see P as a live possibility. Only B would see it as a live possibility. A could even assign a greater probability to P than B. Say A assigns 0.25, and while B is still at 0.1, without changing the fact that only B sees P as a live possibility. Yeah, so if it's above one person's threshold but not another, then they're not going to see it as live. On the author's live possibility account, these interpersonal differences in threshold value explain why some people hope while others do not. However, to deepen our understanding of hope, we need to go further and ask what factors determine this threshold value. Yeah, this is the thing. They're just saying, look, people have different standards. So 20% one day might not be the same 20% another day because their standards are changing in the background where that does it. So, I mean, this is very, like I said, hand wavy where you're saying, oh, it's context dependent. Context doesn't tell you anything. That's just saying, all right, people change, but why? You can assign numbers to stuff, but that's not telling you anything. It's just saying you have to go look at why they're assigning the numbers. That they're assigning the numbers, okay, but that's more of a way that makes things convenient for the philosophy, but that's not telling you anything. So I agree with what they just said down here, but this is all just a philosophical convenience, this whole section right here. I mean, I guess that's okay. Gotta write some analytic, you gotta hand wave at analytic philosophy. That's what people like. All right. 4.1, factors determining the threshold value. What factors are involved in determining a subject's probability threshold for regarding an epistemic possibility as alive? In offering a first approximation, I consider the epistemic context, the stakes involved in the plurality of psychological sources touched upon by Calhoun. However, before I proceed, it is important to stress that these factors should not be taken to be the final word on the matter. Other factors might be relevant too, or at least in certain cases, for instance, Huang's perceived way or Calhoun's phenomenological idea. One benefit of a threshold account is that it need not immediately pinpoint every factor that might influence the threshold. Rather, it can be adapted to accommodate additional factors when they come to be known, allowing for theoretical growth as well as for explanations of non-standard cases where the threshold value is influenced by highly unusual or even unique factors. Viper says, we shouldn't forget that the third of a pound burger failed because most people thought they were getting less than a quarter pounder. Yeah. That's exactly right. That's why one of these reasons I hate when philosophers introduce numbers. They're doing it for convenience and so that they can do some math stuff. It doesn't seem to make sense most time in what people actually are thinking about. One thing I'll say right here is that what they're saying here is that let's highlight this. That the threshold account needs not immediately pinpoint every factor that might influence the threshold. That's because they are describing it. They're not actually explaining the threshold here. They're not explaining why any one thing makes something a threshold. That's the problem that they really have. You don't know what the threshold is, and so the idea that they're assigning numbers to it, like a quarter pound or like a 0.33 for your quarter pound, for your third of a pound versus 0.25 for your quarter pound, that's not telling you why a threshold got set up in the first place. Now, it can tell you that it's describing how it got set there, not what actually sets the threshold at any one spot. Why a threshold is set at all. They're just assuming it is. And so that's kind of a problem here. Is again, they're not really explaining what they need to explain is why are thresholds being set at all differently, not that it's only describing the fact that a threshold is set. Okay. So, continuing. At least two factors concerning the epistemic context are relevant for deciding the probability threshold. The first is that the presence of undefeated alternatives. In most cases, one will not view an option as a live possibility if there are significantly more likely options around. Consider a case where we have three competing hypotheses. Suppose that two of them are much more likely than the third, but none likely enough to warrant belief. Hypothesis A has a probability of 0.4 on the evidence, B 0.3, and C is only 0.1. Okay, so we've got 80% total, and then I guess what's the missing 20% here? This doesn't add up to 1. 4 plus 3, this is the problem, Vipers. 4 plus 3 plus 1 is only 8. That's 80% there. Author continues, I think it is very reasonable to assume that given the presence of A and B, we will standardly not consider C a live possibility. Now suppose that A and B are both falsified, leaving C as the only prospective explanation. It still only has a probability of 0.1 on the evidence, but being the sole viable explanation, it suddenly seems much more reasonable to view C as a live possibility. In other words, we might lower our probability threshold when the probability of all undefeated alternatives is low. But I mean, the chance of neither of these is still 0.2, but relatively at that point, then you've got 0.1 to 0.2, so that's 50. That's 1/3 of the options now. So that makes it much more live. So this is see, look, they just knocked out 0.7 of the 70% of the things if A and B are gone. That means C still has 0.1. Are you trolling me? There is no D. There is no D. I mean, that's a joke, isn't it? God damn it. The likelihood of getting the D. Damn it. Damn it. Damn it. Got me. No, I mean, like, I'm confused at this argument because their probabilities don't add to 1. And so, even assuming that, like, they meant to do this, where the null hypothesis is still 0.2, so 20%. But once you knock out the other 70%, then that 20% is, then you've got 3 options. I mean, that 20% becomes 2/3 of the options, and option C, the null, is 2/3, and option C is 1/3. And at that point, so it's not 0.1 anymore, it's 33%. So, I mean, I don't know what happened right here in this paragraph with the argumentation. Maybe they should have done a full adding to 1, or they should have been more explicit about the null of 0.2 being there. Yeah. Okay, continuing. The second epistemic factor is commitment to other beliefs. If the only alternative coherent with our general web of beliefs is one with low probability, we will presumably be willing to accept a low probability threshold and view such a possibility as live, even though there are other possibilities around with higher probability. Consider Richard, a die-hard naturalist visiting his aunt who lives in a house she claims is haunted. During his stay, Richard experiences all manner of strange things: whisperings in empty rooms, ice-cold winds sweeping indoors through the windows that are locked, moving shadows and ghostly figures walking through walls. Given evidence only, it is a very live possibility that the house is truly haunted. Richard, however, is obsessed with finding a natural explanation. When one is not easily forthcoming, he keeps lowering his threshold for how probable a possibility must be to count as live. Viper says, it is that each probability is in isolation. A has a 40% chance to be true, unrelated to B or C. This is a problem, Vipers. I don't know what they meant. Like, that could be a way of interpreting this. Yeah. I mean, it still would seem very weird that it didn't add up to 1. If they're saying this is 40% chance, this has 30% chance, and then that has a 10% chance. But, like, if they're completely unrelated, what does that mean? Like, because then you wouldn't be adding to 1 still. I mean, that's what I'm saying. Like, was there an option D of 0.2? Yeah, which was like the null hypothesis, like where nothing happens. But they should have said that. They really should have said that. So that's it. Their example makes sense, but it's bad. Like, it took too much work to like I had to reconstruct it. Like, you can reconstruct it if you do the null hypothesis as D with a 0.2. But like, they should, like, it would have taken one more sentence and would have been fine, and instead of having to rely on the reader, and it would have made more sense in general. Because that's the thing. When authors do things like this, then you're left wondering, like you just said, is there something else going on? Now, I've done things where I've been vague at times, and like I'm annoyed with Viper says, email him with that paragraph with the sentence highlighted in the comment. I want the date. Like, yeah, I should. I mean, I used to email all the authors and be like, hey, check out my review of your paper. But, I mean, I've been more foul-mouthed and, like, less nice to the authors lately, so I was always very nice in the past. Well, a long time ago now when I was emailing people, but it's just like, yeah, it might be funny to do that. Just like troll them, like, you didn't have the D here, and I want the D. You're missing. I really want your D. So, but it's just, the problem is it's going to be a disappointing D. It just is. There's nothing that can happen there. It's too small a probability. Anyway, continuing, it seems natural to suppose that his commitment to other coherent beliefs rather than anything else allows him to keep viewing a natural explanation as a live possibility. With other background beliefs, he had been agnostic concerning the supernatural. For instance, he would presumably have stopped his investigation earlier. We might even presume that had he been a firm believer in ghosts from the start, he would never have considered a natural explanation as a live possibility. Yeah, so if you have like some firm commitment that like there are no ghosts, you're going to keep looking for reasons why there are no ghosts. And so what's the hope here though? Yeah, you even if it gets more and more likely that you're wrong about something that you deeply hold, you're still going to like keep reducing your threshold, they're saying? Or was it really that your threshold was already that low and you just didn't realize it? I don't know. Okay. So like I could see people, this is one of those things where you move the goalposts when you really don't want to believe that you're wrong. That makes sense. Author says, another factor determining what counts as a live possibility is the stakes involved. If the matter is trivial and of little concern, the threshold for live possibility is considerably higher than if the matter is of truly great personal importance. If I assign the probability of sunny weather tomorrow as about 10%, I do not really care about the weather. I would presumably not consider sunny weather a live possibility. If I am stuck in a storm in the wilderness and my life depends on the storm ending, a 0.1 to 10% probability of sunny weather might well constitute a live possibility, warranting my hope for survival. If the stakes are high enough, a possibility might be live even though it is not very probable. Yeah, I mean, when things get desperate, you start grasping at straws. That's basically what they're saying here. An objector might question whether it is not superfluous to include high stakes into the account. Do not high stakes invariably imply a strong desire, and if so, can we not make the same points concerning hope using only the concept of desire? The answer is no. Even though in most cases high stakes and strong desires tend to go together, they need not do so, and to have the desired effect on the probability threshold, they both need to be present. For example, if a cancer patient S has only a slight probability of surviving, the stakes are surely high, but if S has lost the will to live and only longs for death, it is implausible to suggest that the stakes themselves could lower the bar and make the chance of survival seem a live possibility. The same goes for the opposite scenario. If the stakes are low, it does not seem that a strong desire alone can lower the threshold. If S, who is terrible at cooking, strongly desires a delicious meal, and it is very improbable but not impossible that a meal made by S happens to be delicious by pure chance, it does seem far-fetched to suppose that S's strong desire alone can lower the probability threshold to make an improbable cooking outcome a live possibility. Finally, let's consider a plurality of psychological sources touched upon by Calhoun. It seems that many of the examples touched upon by Calhoun point to a quite problematic type of psychological source, namely past experiences that influence our anticipation. Quote, that phenomenological idea has other sources as well. Some people, for example, have the good fortune to have had their low-odds pursuits regularly succeed. They become habituated to a successful future. Others are not so fortunate, becoming habituated instead to failure. Yeah, I mean, if you're rich, this is the thing, and like everything works out because you can always pay someone to make it rich, to make it work out, you might think you're like super successful, and like a good businessman. But like if you're poor and everything like doesn't work out for you because you don't have money to pay like good people and whatnot, and you're doing everything yourself and you're stressed out, then you might not have the same sort of like shiny, rosy outlook on the future. All right, author says, there's no doubt that as Calhoun envisages, experience may well affect a subject by producing a false sense for the likelihood of something improbable actually happening. However, such habituation seems to be a blatant source of bias. Since we are only interested in intellectually responsible hope, this is not the kind of psychological factor we are looking for. Not all psychological sources are reducible to bias. For example, it seems obvious that one might be an optimist or a pessimist without letting one's outlook bias one's probability assignments. Consider the classical case of the half-filled glass, where the optimist claims the glass is half full and the pessimist is that it is half empty. Neither is incorrect in estimating how much is left in the glass, but one focuses on the positive aspects and one on the negative. It seems reasonable to suppose that such attitudes will have an impact on which possibilities the subject views as alive. The optimist will have a lower threshold for positive possibilities and presumably also a higher threshold for negative possibilities. Being a pessimist will have the opposite effect on the threshold values, with a low threshold for negative possibilities and a high for positive ones. This means that the optimist will have a higher tendency to form hopes than average, while the pessimist will have a lower tendency. We ought not confuse the pessimist with the skeptic, an everyday skeptic, not a skeptic in the epistemological sense. Viper says, I remember reading something like, rich people have unlimited chances to succeed in business, the middle class has one or maybe two chances to succeed, while the working class never get a chance to even try. Yeah, I've seen similar things like that, and that's what I was referencing. It's that, look, when you're poor, you have chances to do stuff, but like most of the time you have to, get by. When you're rich, you have time to, dedicate to like idle things and see if they work out. And then like when you have a little bit of money, you might get a few chances to do a few things. But like it's just capitalism. They who have the capital in capitalism have more power. Like that's just the definition of capitalism. It's like that's it. So it's just a capitalistic analysis of class structure. But like that's actually bringing that up here is like, what would the author here say about that? It's saying, is that a bias, or is that the way the world is because that's capitalism? If you actually are rich and then like that's the way it is, then maybe this is actually a counterexample to what the author is saying here, because it's not a bias. That is the way the world is right now. It's capitalistic, and so you are correct in your bias because that's how things have always been going for you. But that is the truth, is that when you're rich, you can have more options, and you have and things tend to work out for you, even if you don't quite understand why, but like that actually is the reality that we live in here. So so this actually is a somewhat of a counterexample to their concept of bias here, is the political economic thing here. So that's interesting, because it would not reduce to the psychological, it would reduce to the political and social and economic structure that the person is living in. So it wouldn't be counted as bias, it would just be counted as social theory. Okay. Now the author says we ought not confuse the pessimist with the skeptic. Presumably the skeptic has an overall higher threshold for accepting any possibility as live. One can also imagine the opposite stance, an intellectually flexible subject whose threshold is generally lower than the average, who is often minded to regard a possibility as live. Clearly, these stances are also possible psychological sources, which do not reduce to bias in the probability argument. Yeah, I mean, you can just be generally skeptical. That's fine. Okay, I just want to reiterate, they're going to talk about objections here. I just want to reiterate that basically what the problem here is that this is purely descriptive. Again, they did not tell us why people have these thresholds. They're just saying we have thresholds, and like you can sort of like make up different reasons why they are like this way. And that's kind of what was happening here. There's psychological things, there's biases, like all sorts of stuff. But this account is descriptive. It's not telling us why. It's just telling us that it is this way. And that's okay. Like, it's like, this is my criticism. Is like, I want to know why we have thresholds, and this is why we change our mind about things to have hope or not. But like, this account is not going to tell us why. It's just telling us how it sort of functions. Okay, continuing. Before moving on to discuss the benefits of the account, I wish to address some possible objections. The first is that, given the plurality of factors that may influence the threshold value, an extreme case seems possible where a single factor becomes so dominant that it really is this factor, rather than viewing P as a live possibility which determines the subject's hope. Consider a subject whose hope is based on the idea that some external factor is working in his favor. Okay, so you've got like a god or an angel that is advocating for you. Clearly, this factor might influence the probability threshold, and so it is relevant for the account. Yeah, see, I went and bought the lottery ticket for the $1 billion drawing last week. And so the guy said, "Oh, do you want a second?" I said, "No, this one's going to win. I don't need a second." And so he laughs. He says, "Oh, very wise." And but like, that's the thing. If you think you have a divine advocate, you don't have to worry about the probabilities. So like clearly this factor might influence the probability threshold, so it is relevant for the account. Now, of course, that's the whole point, is that you think that like the probability of winning the lottery, they're saying that is still the same probability, but you think something is going to change it in the last thing. So the probability threshold for you is a lot lower because you think that is actually kind of close over there because your luck is just tremendous. Okay, now assume that for this subject, this belief is about a benevolent external factors is always in play. Yeah, you have an angel on your side, making all of our hopes depend upon it. Should we then not say that it is this belief rather than the notion of a live possibility which determines the subject's hope? Yeah, if you think God's advocating for you, then you might say, well, that's your belief in God and not the possibility of it actually playing out in your favor. Author says, to this objection, I have several things to say. First, I want to stress that my aim is to provide a unified account of all instances of hope, and I think we need a theoretical framework like the one I presented to be able to subsume all relevant factors into a single account in a non-trivial manner. The objection seems to suggest an orthodox definition plus some other factor account where many different factors can play the role of X, so that in some cases the hope is the original account plus belief about some external force. All in other cases, it might be the original account plus the perceived way of realization, and so forth. Such an account would have a serious problem explaining why we should identify all these different composite attitudes with hope. On my account, all instances of hope have the same basic structure, and the multitude of relevant factors only enter the picture at an explanatory level when we ask why there is hope. Yeah, see, this is my exact problem. They aren't telling us anything. They're just saying that it does happen. And so this is interesting. They're defending themselves by saying, I didn't tell you any of this. But like, that's the problem. They're not saying a whole lot. They're just saying there's a threshold. They're not telling us why. But this is why there is hope. Why is the threshold there at all is the problem. Okay. Second, the author says, I do think we should resist the intuition that there is only one factor at work in extreme cases that have a dominant factor. That the dominant factor is present in all occasions need not imply that sorry, the OD is throwing me off. That its addition to the orthodox definition is enough to get an account of hope, which is both necessary and sufficient. It might still be the case that there are other factors which co-varies with the dominant factor and which the dominant factor depend upon. For example, if the subject has a belief about a benevolent external factor which always determines her hope, it might still be the case that her hope also relies on some additional factor like a personality disposition to have faith in a benevolent external factors. Yeah, so if you think that your prayer is going to affect some angel or God that will help you, then you might think, oh, they will help me, but I have to pray, or I have to pray in the right way, certain things like this. So it's like you could actually maybe affect it, or there could be other things. But again, that will affect your hope. And that makes some sense. Author says, third, even though I have focused on other aspects, I do want to stress the importance of getting the phenomenological side of hope right as well. According to the author's account, the Jamesian experience of viewing P as a live possibility always accompanies hope. Clearly, the phenomenological side of hope is neglected in the above objection. On an account where the structure of hope varies radically between instances, it must if we allow for dominant factors to determine hope as envisaged in the objection, it is hard to see how the phenomenological side would remain intact. I think that's wrong. You can still your vision of the future as a phenomenological, like a fantasy. People can fantasize. Like, I can see what they're saying here. They're saying, look, if like your hope is really dependent on something external to you, then, and it's like a single factor, then how are you actually imagining the future? People imagine angels doing and gods doing all sorts of stuff. Go look at the Greek mythology. So yeah, how would you actually fantasize this? People can do that. This person has not enough faith in like people's imaginations. But okay. I get their point. If something else, like you're worried about the whims of the gods, how are you actually having faith in the gods? If like the whims, if like your future is on the whims of like some mad god, Sithrak, an insane god for an insane world. Yes, the only person you can rely on, Sithrak. The only god you can rely on. Excuse me. Viper says, I just read that the NZPM, so it's New Zealand, Jacinda Ardern, has resigned because she no longer has enough in the tank to do the job. Wow, really? And this is why we get shitty leaders who don't care. This is why I don't have hope. Oh my God, cause she was kind of like a darling for a while. She just said, enough of this crap. I'm done. Damn. Okay. Yeah. Our political situation in the world is not looking very hopeful. Yeah. Okay. I mean, I'm sure that'll be like headline news over the next few days, so we'll find out if like there was any like underlying scandal or something. But like if she's just like, I'm too dead for this because it's like killing me, that's sad. Yeah. I used to sort of poo-poo on the ideas. Shit. Yep. All right, there we go. And Vipers has provided the link. The idea of sort of the technological advance in politics. Like, I didn't think, you need people to actually go in and like understand what the problems are to solve them. But more and more and I don't like this, but like the sort of like the AI is just sort of like showing a few different possibilities, and then like having people maybe vote on like what the AI thinks is a good idea might be getting more important, to like at least have some people who are not like completely insane or going to be drained like Jacinda Ardern apparently has become. Like, I'm actually softening to this idea. I didn't like it in the past. I still don't like it. But like, I think there's more of a role for a chat GPT giving us like some political possibilities, and then everyone be like, okay, this is what the AI says, and then we can like discuss it. But like, as opposed to like killing our leadership, that just does like draining them so badly that they can't even work. We need to offload some of that effort and time. That's bad. Okay. Interesting news. Yeah, thank you. Yeah, I don't trust. Yeah, Vipers. I do not trust Skynet. I mean, at least I trust Skynet to be Skynet. I do not trust machines to rule us. It's terrible. You say the Viper says the problem is that we have a global economy and global problems, but only national solutions. Yeah, like our current status, and I think everyone is coming around to the idea that things are kind of messed up right now. I've not heard any. Oh no, like things are okay at the moment. From basically anyone, and you used to hear stuff like that every so often, like, oh no, we'll figure out our problems. Like, we just need to put more time and effort in, but like we're doing okay. I haven't heard anyone say that lately. I mean, the only people who say that seem to have a lot of money and power already, and they want the status quo to continue. Very few people actually haven't heard that at all. So, anywho, yeah. So something has to go, and I don't want to be in charge either. You know who needs to be in charge? Shane McInnes, because he says he's just be a terrible leader, and I believe him. But like, at least I know who Shane is. Sorry, Shane, if you're listening. Okay, let's finish up this last little bit, and we'll see what their benefits are in a second. Author says, I also want to address some further objections concerning the necessity and sufficiency of the account. Necessity first. It is not obvious that one can hope for something that is not a live possibility in the sense described here, but only an epistemic possibility in the widest possible sense. Like hoping for the existence of the flying spaghetti monster, or that one will have a chance to meet with a billionaire who has just decided to donate his fortune to the first person he meets. In the face of these examples, I want to stress that I only claim that a live possibility is necessary for rational hope. Yeah, you can have like foolish hope. Yeah, the hopes just mentioned are most certainly examples of foolish hopes. Yeah, so this is the thing. Anything like say outside the threshold plus like a standard deviation would count as a foolish hope for like this author here. Again, we don't know why the thresholds are where they are, but that's what they're calling foolish hope, is anything far beyond the threshold limit. What the worry about What about the worry that seeing something one desires as a live possibility is not sufficient for hope? We might imagine a version of Shawshank scenario where Red and Andy frame their discussion in terms of live possibilities. While the hopeful Andy claims it is only 1 chance in 20, but it is a live possibility, might not Red reply, I recognize that as a live possibility, but it is only 1 chance in 20, and continue to despair. Yeah, I mean, you can be dogmatic. That's okay. Yeah, and the author is going to be dogmatic. Tindarios, how you been? What's up? Tindari says, and most people only think in a national way on both sides of the political spectrum. Yeah, people, how many of us have really global experience? You can only think locally about what you know, and so it's like it's very hard to actually think internationally, and so that's the thing. But it's a very good point. And this is part of the thing that globalization, like the transportation and the internet and all this stuff, no one has experienced this in the history. Hey, I thank you for the lurk. I thank everyone for lurks. I know there's some people here. I see I actually have my numbers up usually, so I know when there's no one here, and I'm just like reading the paper for myself. But I know there's people here, so I was like, I appreciate the lurks. I don't look who's here though, so I'm not gonna call anyone out. But appreciate the lurks, all you lurkers out there. Yeah. Okay, yeah, so they're going to bite the bullet. Here, the author has to bite the bullet and claim that Red does not really see the possibility in question as a live possibility, even though he claims to do so, or alternatively, that he understands the concept of a live possibility in a way that not compatible with the main thrust of the author's account. According to the author's view, if one regards a desired possibility as live, one hopes by definition, so to claim that a live possibility is too unlikely to warrant hope, which is what Red seems to be doing, simply does not make any sense on the author's account. I also want to stress that I do not claim that what constitutes a live possibility must be obvious from a first-person point of view, even if one grasps the concept. There is nothing inherently odd in being wrong about whether a quite sophisticated philosophical concept is applicable, even if its application is to one's own thoughts. Yeah, I mean, you can't go start telling people like complicated philosophy. I'm like, oh no, you've got this complicated philosophy term wrong. It's like no one gives a fuck about complicated philosophy terms. But like, yeah, of course, people can be mistaken about like the analytic philosophy, but are they mistaken that they're hopeful or not? Probably not. But like how you define that, I mean, that's for philosophers to care about, not for people to actually like. People, either you hope or you don't, and you know. Okay, so some benefits of the account according to the author. Apart from satisfying the desiderata, the live possibility account comes with at least 2 additional benefits. It presents an elegant solution to the exclusion problem and provides a unified analysis in covering all instances of hope. Tindari says, well, about most topics, they overgeneralize and arrange the subject according to their pre-existent worldview. Yeah, I mean, and that's what we all do. I don't pretend like I'm so much better or any better than anyone else, really. I just know my little corner of the universe. Hopefully better. At least I like to think I know something about some of the things I talk about, but about it, everything else is like other people know stuff too. Yeah. Okay. I mean, this is the thing. Are you going to tell someone like that they are not despairing when they're despairing? No. I mean, are you going to tell like a sick patient like, oh, be happy? Like that doesn't work. Like, are you telling them they're not depressed? They have no hope? Like you have to take people at their word for a lot of times, at least for this, telling them like, how do you feel? When someone's in the hospital, you have to be like, how do you feel? They ask you this and you have to tell them, and like, don't lie about that stuff because, like that stuff matters. Now, if we're talking about philosophy stuff like Tindario's mentioning, like, yeah, they're going to fit stuff into their worldview, but like if as long as they have like some idea about like hope and sadness and like despair, then hopefully we can figure out what they mean. But yeah, when it comes to the politics, absolutely. Viper says, paraphrased internet memes make me despair. Despair of nuts. D's nuts? Yeah. I mean, to be like perfectly like frank, it's like social media does depress people. So basically internet memes do make you depressed. So it just is, that's like a sad fact of like social media. if you're on social media too much, you likely will be depressed. I don't know about Twitch. I haven't heard Twitch as a social media stuff, but like Facebook and stuff and Twitter, that definitely will make you that they do know that will make you depressed and have like body issues and all sorts of things, depending on which social media you're talking about. Okay. The exclusion problem. The account handles the exclusion problem by requiring that hope must be based on a live possibility. The live possibility defining you into the fact that it means that you have hope. That's just what they said right up here. That's literally what it was. That by definition, right up here, that this is what it is. If P constitutes a live possibility for the subject who desires P, then the subject will hope. If P is not a live possibility for S, there is no room for hope. If we return to the examples from section 2, we can now decide whether the subjects hope or not. Yeah, because they're defining it as a way to guarantee it or not, because they're placing the threshold where they need it to be for it to be hope or despair. Like it's a post hoc theory here. All right. First, the soldier during the Great War. How does he view the slim but non-negligible probability of getting out alive? Only if he sees it as a live possibility will he have hope. Of the deciding factors mentioned in the previous section, the ones concerning epistemic context seem irrelevant here, but the stakes are surely high. So if the soldier has not lost his desire to survive, which the example claims he has not, we can presume that he will hope. I will write presume because as I hope is clear now, I think there are a lot of factors which can influence the probability threshold. Therefore, I do not want to deny that there might be a second soldier in the same trench who views survival as just as likely as the first and who has the same desires to live, but who despairs since he fails to see survival as a live possibility. Viper says it's a comparison problem. People present the best version of themselves on social media, so I imagine it isn't much of a problem with Twitch as it is much harder to deceive live. Yeah, that's exactly what I was thinking. It's that the nature of Twitch makes it so you are seeing some things as like super fancy, but it's not that you're getting a curated image of people, because you're getting a more interactive and a more live view of them. Now, of course, there are like the people with like the live face changing things, but like that's harder to maintain over time, and that's gonna be a much more limited thing in Twitch. So I think that's exactly what I was getting at. So it's that Twitch is, even though this might be considered social media, the nature of the interaction is different because it's not curated. Tindari says, for example, I went to Israel, Jordan, Palestine, and then I heard about Palestine, and then I heard about the bullshit that people claim how it is over there, which never traveled there by themselves and don't know a person living there. Yeah. Exactly. And that's the thing. The media presents one thing. Some things are good, some things are bad. You go over there, you talk to the people, completely different takes on stuff. It's like you have to start to really regulate how you understand what people are telling you and how the media looks. Viper says, and yet I haven't had the potential sex dream about anyone on Facebook or Twitter. I don't believe you. You've never had, because there's like celebrities on Twitter and Facebook. But, yeah, again, the interactions are different. And so are you going to get like maybe body shaming? Like not body shaming, like what's it called? Because you see all the like glamour shots of people on other social media, and so you might get like feel bad about your body if you look at all these models all day. But again, you're not going to interact with them, and so you may not. You're gonna like this sort of interaction. You get like parasocial relationships where you think people know more about you. You feel like connections to them because you're talking to them through chat and whatnot. So it's a different sort of interaction, and so you're going to have potentially other things going on in your lives. Yeah. So it's like you're going to get different problems. I'm not saying like Twitch is somehow better. I'm just saying you're going to have a lot different sort of things going on here. Tindira says, I always imagine by the worst picture they got on social media. Yeah. It's always kind of fun. I'm on Reddit too much. And there's what's called Instagram reality, where you see the Instagram model Instagram pic next to their like a non-Instagram pic. And you can see it's the same person, but they look completely different. Yeah, I'm on Reddit too much. And you can guess my fucking username there too. So, actually, it's not exactly the same. It's very close to the same thing. Yeah, you'll find out. I post in the Logic subreddit, and not a whole lot else at the moment. I don't really like most of the philosophy subreddits, and generally I have museum, so I get pretty pictures. I have fountain pens because I write in fountain pens. And I like pictures of fountain pens. Yeah, I haven't done that in a while. I mean, I haven't changed anything in a while. The only thing I got rid of was I used to have like a 4chan crap, like just to filter in to give me some laughs, but like it's gotten just so terrible over time, or maybe I've gotten older. I just can't take the green text anymore. Yep, the memes just don't hit like they used to. They just don't hit like they used to. All right, so we're talking about soldiers. So one soldier thinks they're going to live, the other one doesn't. So obviously the stakes are equally high for this soldier, so the explanation for his despair must be found elsewhere. Perhaps he is of a pessimistic or a skeptical nature, or perhaps his probability threshold is temporarily raised by having a particularly bad day. Yeah, exactly, Instagram reality. And so you can see just like sometimes people look basically the same, sometimes they look completely fucking different. And it's like good to, remember that like what you're doing on these like curated social media sites is always a curated feed. It's not like a live feed like this. Like, if like I have a bad hair day, like it's like there's nothing I can do about that. It's like whatever. As if I ever had a bad hair day, of course. Okay. Or perhaps he is so shaken by seeing his best friend being blown up by the enemy that he's unable to picture any different fate for himself. What my account denies is only that this second soldier would be identical to the first in all aspects, which have a bearing on the probability threshold. The pessimistic investigator hunting a serial killer is in a more complex situation. Obviously, the stakes are high, but the pessimistic nature of the investigator suggests that his probability threshold for viewing positive outcomes as live possibilities is generally high. However, we should also consider the coherence of the purported hope and background beliefs. The investigator believes himself to be competent in light of his track record, and if there are no other relevant factors, it does seem plausible to suggest that this is sufficient to enable hope. Does he hope to solve the case by stumbling into the killer on the street? Presumably not, since there are undefeated alternatives which allow for the same outcome, which are much more likely. Viper says, I think it was a British comedian named Spike Milligan, or may have been Roald Dahl. Roald Dahl is an author, not a comedian, but okay. I like Roald Dahl, by the way. Who said that when you're young, you see the world as sane with little pockets of insanity dotted about, but as you grow older, you begin to understand that the world is insane with only little pockets of sanity, and that's why things become less funny as you age. Yeah, absolutely. Like I used to, like what was it? I used to think everything was bullshit. I just didn't realize exactly how far the bullshit reached. Like I thought, like there's things that are good, bad, and like then there's the scenery. Like you're part of the solution, you're part of the problem, you're part of the scenery. From the old line from Ronan. I didn't realize that like there's like the sane parts, there's the bullshit parts, but then I thought there was like all this like scenery that was just like neutral. I was completely wrong about that. And there's a whole lot more like just part of the problem is the scenery is the problem itself. And so it's not that like there's like, good things, bad things, and then just neutral stuff. There's a lot less neutral stuff. A lot of it's just bullshit also. And so like even though I thought everything was bullshit, I thought there was neutral stuff there. I was wrong. I was like, just as I gotten older, I've realized more and more the stuff you thought was like maybe not good or bad. No, like it has a valence. Okay. Yeah. All right. Finishing this paragraph up. The problem, the solution, or the hostile architecture. Yeah, exactly. It wasn't just the scenery. The architecture is hostile. Like it's just dangerous and bad. All right. The account also has the resources to explain the well-known situation where a subject is torn between hope and despair. The analysis suggests two kinds of circumstances where this could happen. The first is epistemic, where a subject is unable to ascertain the possibility if the possibility is live or not. Yeah, if you're like right at the threshold. You just don't know what's going on. Perhaps the probability is hard to determine, or perhaps the subject is uncertain regarding some determining factor, like whether some more probable alternative remains undefeated. The second kind of circumstance by which a subject is caught between hope and despair is when the factors deciding the probability threshold change continually. The most likely reason for this is that the undefeated alternatives emerge continuously, only to be defeated. So imagine circulating rumors in a high-stake situation. Yeah, I mean, if everything's fluid, you're gonna have a lot of trouble. And that's basically that could happen. And so you don't really know what the hope consists of then, because just things are too fluid, and that happens. Okay, and so this is last page basically here. A unified account. For several authors on hope, it is not prosaic everyday hope, but the profound hope against hope that is most interesting. It has even been suggested that the orthodox definition is enough for prosaic hope, but not for hope against hope. One might question if my unified account, which makes no explicit distinction between the types can handle the more profound kind. As it happens, I think it can. This is due to the fact that the threshold value, which determines what is a live possibility and therefore also when one hopes, varies with the factors commonly thought to distinguish prosaic hope from profound. Profound hope is often characterized as a case in which the stakes are high and the probability low. Yeah, this is the flying pigs. Like if you're hoping for flying pigs here. Also, a subject hoping against hope, Stanley portrayed as clinging to the possibility of one last unlikely outcome. In Martin's archetypical example of hope against hope, a patient with terminal cancer enrolls in a medical experiment testing a new treatment with a very low chance of curing her. In such a case, there are presumably no undefeated alternatives left. Furthermore, the stakes are very high, a matter of life or death, and the desire is presumably correspondingly strong. On the live possibility account, high stakes combined with strong desire and the absence of relevant alternatives are important factors that can severely lower the probability threshold. By providing an understanding of hope which is sensitive to these factors, my view can account also for such profound hope. It can do so without having to make the unlikely claim that one is never blameworthy for hoping on such a low probability. That's interesting that they bring this up. That it's interesting that you could. This must be a common criticism is that people are hoping ridiculous things and like you're being foolish for doing so. But like you don't want to feel bad. Like for someone who really is desperate, it's not really foolish. They just have nothing else to do. So that is a nice feature of this account. Again, like I was going to say later and before, this is a descriptive account, not exactly explaining why, but this threshold, they're making a lot of hay out of it. Yeah, like the Jets winning the Super Bowl. Seeing as the Jets aren't even in the playoffs anymore, that's not happening. The Giants winning the Super Bowl would have been much more like, how dare you, Vipers? How could you say that? But yes, close. Another benefit of my account is that it allows for a variety of factors influencing the probability threshold, not only explaining why some have a profound hope, but also why some do not hope against hope, even though they are in a very similar situation as a person with profound hope, like Red in Shawshank. Personality factors or differences in background beliefs are examples of possible explanations. Also, the account allows for impacting factors which are quite unique to the case at hand, like Plenty Coop's vision. Acknowledging that different instances of profound hope can depend on quite different things on my account, there is no need to overstate the similarity between different hopes. Well, I don't expect a non-U.S. person to understand the two New York American football teams. So it's like, yeah, you were close. You were very close, actually. But like, you can, they were already eliminated from contention this year. But like, you were close. So you were close enough that I understood. And that's all that usually matters. So, continuing. One should not underestimate the beliefs of a unified account. If one opts for different analyses for profound and everyday hope, one's analysis will be at odds with ordinary language, and it's hard to see how one could avoid the conclusion that our everyday understanding of hope is seriously confused, conflating two attitudes best kept separate. A unified account is able to preserve the intuition that although their hopes differ in important ways, the cancer patient and the buyer of the lottery ticket share the same basic attitude. Okay, and you know what I like about this? They're not even calling it a conclusion. They're just saying, I'm going to summarize. Author summarizes by, I have argued for a James-inspired live possibility account of intellectual intellectually legitimate hope. On my view, the epistemic condition of hope should be reinterpreted as requiring a subject to view P as a live possibility. Live possibilities are understood to have a probability that meets a certain threshold value, a value which varies greatly between subjects and situations due to numerous factors such as epistemic context, the stakes involved, and certain psychological matters. The live possibility account offers a neat solution to the exclusion problem. If a subject desiring P also views the actualization or truth of P as a live possibility, she hopes for P. If P is not a live possibility, the intellectually legitimate hope is not possible. Let's just highlight that immediately. Not only does the account solve the exclusion problem by separating hope from non-hope, it also has the resources to explain the puzzling phenomenon to which the exclusion problem draws our attention. That is, it can provide a satisfying explanation of how one subject and not another can hope, where they share the same desire and assign the same probability. While most accounts simply push the problem back a level in the explanatory chain, the live possibility account explains the phenomenon in terms of individual differences in the factors governing the probability threshold. These explanatory resources also shed the difference between profound and prosaic hope, resulting in a unified and comprehensive account. If you're hoping for Indian food, hope and non-hope are the same thing. You're fucking with the non-hope. Yeah, okay. God damn it. I am hoping for naan. I do like a good naan. Okay, so what was this? Where's the thing? While most accounts simply push back the problem in the explanatory chain. I'm sorry, author. This is exactly what you did. You pushed the problem back in the explanatory chain by asking why is the why is the threshold put where it is? And that's all we need to know now. If someone's hoping, why is their threshold that is either above or below the probability where it is? That's what we need to know. Why are they hoping? The fact that you are describing the threshold is fine, but that is a description. That is not explaining. So this is just telling, like this first thing I highlighted right here, this is just telling us what is happening when you hope. It's saying that you have gone over the threshold. It does not explain why the threshold is where it is, and that's what this is right here. You're saying you've got to explain that. We don't know that. You're just saying you're above or below a threshold. That's all that happened here. Now, is this a good way of viewing the problem? It does seem like they've explained a bunch of things. Maybe this is right, and maybe this is the right explanatory chain to be going down. That might be the chief contribution of this paper, that they say, look, even if you are seeing the same possibilities of like escape or hope, objectively, probabilistically the same way, the way you feel about that is different. Now, why do you feel that? Then you've pushed it back another level. But the way you feel about that is what matters. Maybe that's the right way to go. And that all these other people really should have just said, hey, look, we have to step back and we have all these different ways of talking about it, which they just said up here, these live possibilities, the reasons for it. But has this person actually solved the problem? No. They have done what everyone else did. So you Googled New York sports team, tell the Staten Island Fairhawks that their name made me chuckle. Yeah, that's like a, I don't even know who they are. That's probably a junior team or whatever, not a like super professional one. I forget what I don't know what those guys actually do, the Ferry Hawks, because the Staten Island Ferry is a thing. Like there's no like easy way to get to Staten Island from Manhattan except via ferry. Yeah, minor league baseball, that makes sense. Yeah, so they're not like the top tier. We've got the Yankees and the Mets as far as baseball goes. We've got the Giants and the Jets in terms of football. We've got the Rangers and the Islanders and the New Jersey Devils, basically, all in the same area. The Islanders really, and the Rangers for that. We've got a few near NYCFC. We've got that's a proper soccer or football club. Then there's another one I forget also. I forget what that one's called. But yeah, like those are the major teams. And the Knicks and the Nets for basketball. But yeah. So that's it. So again, in the end, do I like this analysis? Yes, I like the analysis of this paper's analysis. Do I think that they've made a good contribution? I kind of like the way they went about it. Gave a good framework. The problem was they thought they were explaining something. They didn't. They gave a description of stuff, and that's a fine thing to be doing, to like give a better description of like the phenomenon than like this unification thing. Maybe this is really the best thing that they did, that they gave a good enough description of the phenomenon that we can unify all the accounts of hope. It does not explain why we hope and why we don't, outside of saying, well, they have different thresholds, but that doesn't tell us anything. You have to know why the thresholds are different. And that would go into like the phenomenological possibilities. That would go into like the epistemic context, as they say, psychological matters. Who knows? But that's the thing. So this is good. This has some good things, but again, they did not explain what they thought they explained. But like I thought this was like, they still did a bunch of good work in this paper. So like, yeah, why is it live possibility? And this is the one, like, I think right here is where they showed their hand, as it were. They say, here I have to bite the bullet. But then when they come, then they say that it must be based on a live possibility, and they're treating this like an explanation, but they have to bite the bullet in these cases where someone disagrees with them, which basically means they're defining it in terms of this. So that's okay, but then defining it there has not explained anything, is just defined it that way. That's all right. We have to give something another thing. Why is the threshold where it is? They didn't give that. They just hand waved at all the options, like over here. Okay. Any last comments on why we hope, or what we hope to get out of reading philosophy on Twitch or anything like that? And I can't even complain. For my 400th philosophy roulette, this was a nice paper. It was really not bad. I didn't stumble too much on the words. It was okay. So, thank you all for being here for the 400th episode of Philosophy Roulette.